All right, we're back on Sports 225 with a guy I've tried to line up for a long time, and we finally corralled him in studio, Kevin Mawae, who played football at LSU during a time when, wow, Mike Archer was finishing his career and Curly Hallman took over. That seems like a long time ago. You know why? Because it was.
Long time ago, and it's the forgotten years of LSU football, but it's over 20, 25 years or something like that. And but hey, I made it out, and I had success, and I'm still a diehard LSU Tiger, and that's all that really matters.
Well, I want to talk to you about that, of course, the LSU football team, but Kevin went on to a very, very excellent pro career, 16 years, 8 Pro Bowls, which means half the time that you were in the league, you were an all-star, which is pretty impressive. And he was president of the NFLPA, which is the NFL Players Association, which anytime is a big deal. But during the time period that he had the job, whoa, that was how you're a kid, you were an Army brat, right?
Yes.
And ultimately finished up in Leesville, Louisiana,
That's
which
right.
is how you got to LSU probably, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously, if your father had settled somewhere else, you would have gone somewhere else to school.
Probably.
But could you have ever imagined, A, that you would become a center in the NFL because you were never a center before that, right? You were a linebacker.
No, I was signed out of high school out of Leesville as a center.
Oh, were you?
And because of injuries at LSU, I was moved over to left tackle, and then so I bumped around all along the offensive line, but finally settled in at my natural position at center as a senior at LSU.
Well, that's all right. So then the other part of the question would be that you would be the spokesperson for the most visible league and the most athletes. You know,
during the most tumultuous time of the history, within the recent history. Yeah, it's you don't ever write your script and how you want to go. The football part of it, you think that there's a dream. For me, it was starting at 8 years old. I knew I wanted to play the NFL, and so the LSU just happened to be the next stop. Playing at Leesville High School, I played with Eddie Fuller, Vincent Fuller, Raymond Smoot, so all 3 guys that came on to LSU, and it was a very successful program. But yeah, you're right. If my dad had gotten stationed at Fort Worth, Alabama, or some other military town, chances are, if I would have been fortunate enough, would have played for some other school. And
sure.
But being at Leesville High School, having teammates go to LSU, and then my coach gave me some wisdom back then. Brownie Parma, he said, "Well, where are you going to live when you get done with college?" I said, "Probably come back to Louisiana." He goes, "Well, think about if you're an LSU alum looking for a job versus if you're an alumni from some other school and your boss is an LSU guy. Who do you think he's going to hire?" So probably the LSU guy. And so it made sense to me. I was an early commit and never looked back. But go on, fast forward to however 20 years later when I became the president of the PA, it's something, there's just something in me that you serve the guys that you're with. And I started off as a player rep, and then I started off as then I worked my way up to an executive vice president on the union's board. And things were happening within the organization themselves that I just didn't sit well with me. And there was nobody there to really put the brakes on and stop it. And I just felt the calling to run for the president position. I won. And then it got real hard after that. So,
well, we'll get to that in a minute. But it's hard to be in that position because in some ways the league respects a guy who stands up for what's right and takes on those positions. On the other hand, you could be looked at as a rabble-rouser and a bad guy, and that probably didn't help your career at the very end.
I was the Norma Ray of the NFL in 2010, 11, and 12 during the work stoppage and things like that. And it is, over the history of the NFLPA, the one guy that never got a job back after a labor stoppage or a strike or whatever was always the president of the NFLPA. And that's just a history and that's not saying that it was a convenient excuse in my situation. I was 38 years old, 39 years old. My contract was up. Ironically enough, my last game was the All-Star game, a Pro Bowl game. But I never got a phone call until 2 weeks or 3 weeks into the next training camp. And by then the situation wasn't right. And so I made the decision to go ahead and retire.
Well, you got a great family. You got 2 young children you want to spend time with.
Absolutely,
and, you get to
more
a point
important
where,
things.
Yeah, and you walked away more or less intact.
Somewhat. Yeah, I wake up a little slower, but I don't walk with a gimp, and I'm not on painkillers and all that kind of stuff. I've been fortunate. I had some injuries that I had 1 year of IR, but they were all upper body. Tore my elbows up a little bit, but I can still walk, and there's no limps.
All right, let's for a couple minutes just in this segment talk about concussions, since that was the most newsworthy thing that you fought with at the end of your deal. The NFL and the NFL Players Association, and that goes back to guys who played a long time ago, came to a settlement. And on the surface, you look at the number and you go, ooh, the NFL dug deep. And then there's people who really look at it and go, the NFL got off really easy on this deal.
The NFL got off really easy. It's a $765 million settlement for the 4,500 players that were part of the class action lawsuit, of which I was not. I chose not to be a part of that lawsuit. There are guys that are played in the earlier generations in the 60s and the 70s that are far worse off than I am or may ever be, that need that money now. And so it was a decision by me not to be a part of that lawsuit, because whatever financial gain I could have gotten would have been minuscule compared to what they need. And then there's a fundamental belief that I have that I knew going into the game what could happen. And I have a hard time believing, especially guys in my age group, that say that they didn't know that the NFL could cause serious injuries to your head. I mean, there's a sticker that's been on the back of our helmets since we were kids that says this game can cause harm, injury, or death, or paralysis. And that's something that I just personally have a fundamental issue with, the guys that say I didn't know. But the money itself,
it's their lawyers. It's
yeah,
not
well,
them,
I know,
but
the money itself, $756 million. We're talking $65 million to be paid out over a course of 20 years. When it's a league that made $9.5 billion last year, and their estimated revenue per year, not over the next 20 years, but in year 2025, they are estimated to make $27 billion in 1 year. Wow. And so 756 or 765 million is a small amount to make this whole thing go away. And the even more important part of it is not really the money, it's the information that they have, that we know that they have, for studies that they debunked, that they pay for themselves, that showed the relationship between concussions and long-term health care effects, that they never have to disclose those anymore, because a part of the lawsuit was they don't have to show anything that they knew. And that's the disappointing part about the lawsuit.
And more than anyone, it's those guys who have head injuries or maybe just, debilitating effects from overplaying, if you will, or whatever, just being part of that game from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, who get hurt the most by this, probably.
Absolutely, and because what we're finding out, and what I think what they show, is that the guys that played in the 60s and 70s, those guys have a legitimate argument, because the science wasn't there to understand the head injuries and trauma and what it does for the long term of your life. But if the guys that came into the late 80s and the 90s, when I came in, that's when those studies were taking place by the NFL, and when the results were coming out that showed the correlation between long-term health care effects and the concussions or multiple traumatic brain injuries and stuff like that, that they've kind of brushed under the rug or kept saying that the science was faulty or what have you. And that's the frustrating part, because it's it's the information that they have, that they knew that they had, that rather than sharing that with their players so that a player can make a more intelligent decision on their career, they decided to brush it under the rug in order to protect the NFL. And in the NFL, it's all about the shield and to protect the brand. But it's a game it's a collision sport. It's not a contact sport. It's a sport that you get hurt and players die on the field. But what we're finding out now is more players are dying slowly because of the effects of the game than ever before. And two guys right now is Kevin Turner and Steve Gleason. Gleason played for New Orleans, now has ALS, is in a wheelchair. And I have a teammate, Steve Smith, played fullback for the Raiders and the Seattle Seahawks. He's bedridden and he has ALS, and it's just a terrible way for your life to end. And it's all because of the effects that they've suffered as players in the NFL.
Well, we want to talk about that. It's which we'll get more lighthearted, or maybe we'll get sadder. We'll talk about your time at LSU. I don't know; those weren't the best years. Kevin Mawae was a 16-year pro, 8 years All-Pro, an inductee into the LSU Athletic Hall of Fame, and my guest on Sports 225. I'm Lee Feinswag. We'll be right back.